Hello everyone and welcome to today's panel discussion. On behalf of American Petroleum Professionals of Iranian Heritage, APPIH, it's our great honor to start the second session of the panel discussion for jobs in oil and gas and beyond. Before starting to short announcement, please during and after discussion, switch off your microphone and camera. And if you have a question, please write in chat box. Second, a recorded version of this session shortly after will be available at APPIH social networks. Let's introduce today's moderator. It's our great honor that today we have Dr. Khoshghadam. He has significant experience in reserve estimation, numerical modeling, and data analysis. Currently, he's working for New Dawn Energy Company. I would thank Dr. Khoshghadam for accepting our invitation, and without further delay, I'm transferring microphone to him for starting the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel. Please mute your microphones. I'd like to thank Hamid and all of APPIH officers. They have done a great job during the COVID-19 pandemic by hosting several panels and webinars. Please follow them on social media, especially LinkedIn, like their posts and help them in any way that you can. Also, if you'd like to share your current or past research and interesting work, please do not hesitate to contact them. They'll be happy to have you and present your work. Our first panel was about 2 months ago, and you could watch a recorded video of the panel on APPIH LinkedIn page. Our goal in this panel series are to bring together bright minds in our industry to talk and discuss the job market. Our panel has 2 sections. First, we discuss the overall job market situation during and after the coronavirus with all of our panelists. Then we'll ask each of our panelists to talk and discuss about more targeted subjects with regard to their background. At the end, we will have about 10 to 15 minutes for your questions. Today, we have 3 great panelists. I personally know and work with 2 of them, and I'm really excited to have them here. Let me start with a brief introduction of our panelists. First, Dr. Ali Daneshy. Dr. Daneshy is the president of Daneshy Consultant International. He has served as the director of petroleum engineering at the University of Houston from 2004 to 2007. Dr. Daneshy worked for Halliburton for many years in several technical and managerial positions all over the world. Dr. Daneshy is a very active member of SPE. He was SPE director from 2005 to 2008, and he has received several SPE Distinguished Awards. Dr. Daneshy has a PhD in mining engineering from University of Missouri Rolla. He's a co-editor-in-chief and publisher of Hydraulic Fracturing Journal, a quarterly publication entirely dedicated to the various technical and operational aspects of hydraulic fracturing. Our second panelist is Dr. Martiza Naraki. He's a data science consultant at ZS. Before joining ZS, he had worked as a data science scientist for California Data Science and PanFan. His area of expertise are in application of AI and machine learning in reservoir characterization. He has a PhD and master's degree in petroleum engineering from UT Austin and 2 bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and petroleum engineering. Our third panelist is Hudson Chen. He has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and master's degree in petroleum engineering. He has worked for DuPont and Schlumberger before entering the world of recruiting. Through his career, Hudson has placed hundreds of mid to senior professionals in companies ranging from small, privately held organizations to Fortune 100 companies. In his spare time, Hudson has helped job seekers with resume edits, interview preparations, and overall career advice. He is currently the Director of Recruiting Operations and Business Development at Stark Recruiting Partners. Well, thank you all for accepting our invitation and help us to hold these events. Let's start the panel with our first questions. This questions is for all of our panelists. But we'll start with Dr. Daneshy first. So what is your overall evaluation of oil and gas job market at the current conditions based on your observation in the past few months? Has there been any improvement?
Generally, no. The condition really hasn't changed. And part of the reason I think that it hasn't changed is because the level of activity, the operational activities and so on, hasn't changed that much. You know, coronavirus, everybody thought that we have got over it and now we're going to get out of it. It still has. And so there is not the need for oil and gas has basically stayed constant in the last 4 or 5 months. And so the oil and gas companies also, the price of oil is of course down. The price of oil is around $40 a barrel. And at that price, companies cannot make a profit. So at this time, there are just maybe a dozen companies who are actively exploring and producing oil and gas, but the rest of them are just holding on. You know, whatever production is coming out of the well, they're just happy with it and they're not doing much beyond that. So the picture hasn't changed. I actually was expecting the picture to change, and I had predicted that the market condition will improve. But because of the continuity of the COVID-19 and the fact that things appear to even be getting worse, I don't think the market change has made that much change.
What about you, Hudson? I mean, have you received more applications, I guess, but what about the employers?
So I'm going to be a little more optimistic than Dr. Daneshy here. I think things have definitely gotten better since April, but has it been so, is it because oil prices went up a little, or, you know, we're not having negative $40 oil, or are companies a little more optimistic, right? But that's not a reflection of the real situation. It's hard to tell right now. I can tell you that I have 2 offers, one for a oil field service company and another for an operator in oil and gas. But I have a bit more calls with companies that are trying to renegotiate fees. So,
and if I may add, when you consider 100,000 people were laid off in the oil and gas industry, having 2 job openings doesn't really make it.
Right. I fully agree, right? It's so is it better? Like I said, I want to be a little more optimistic, but the condition, if you compare this to say this time last year, right, it's no brainer that it's not great.
No, I do agree with you that the condition now is a lot better than it was in April.
Okay, but it's still not where we wanted to be.
Well, a better condition, do you think it's because of how employers and employees now will see the problem as something that they have to live in? Like, I mean, like first when the coronavirus came, it was like a shock to everybody and how they responded. Now that that first response is gone, you know, how we react to it. So do you think things gonna get better?
You see, in April, just about half the jobs in the oil and gas industry were in jeopardy. Major companies had informed their employees that they're going to make a decision whether they will have a job within the next 30 to 60 days or not. Right now, many of the companies have already made that decision and informed their employees. That told those who are going to stay and those. And the other thing that happened, which was not true in April, is that some of these companies are offering retirement options to their employees, basically buy their contracts back. So when you consider those situations, the conditions now are much better than they were in April. In April, everybody's job was in jeopardy. Now the market is a lot stabler. So in that regard, I agree.
Oh, okay. What about you, Hudson?
Right. So for anyone who listened to this podcast for the last round, we had a panelist that from downstream. I think she made some excellent points. If you haven't check that out now. But right, as Corona is limiting our travels, right, people are not driving as much. There's just the demand is no longer the same, right? Airplanes aren't flying as much. We're not driving around, even not even saying vacation, but just going to work, right? So with that being there and the demand not being there, it's hard to say how things are going to recover. But I think going forward, it's going to be a whole different prospect, or really, I guess the right choice word is oil and gas is not going to be the same anymore going forward.
Morteza, what about you? I know you're not directly right now in oil and gas, but how is the situation for you guys? I guess it got better because, you know, everybody needed to work at home and
I mean, there are basically two aspects that we need to be considering. One was what basically Hudson was mentioning, that with the less necessity of travel, basically the demand of the oil is not going to be the same. So that's one of the things that we need to be considering. The other thing is that, I mean, this is more general. This is not applicable, and this is not applicable only to oil industry per se. But I think that in near future we will be experiencing a new definition of normalcy, even after everything for Corona goes back to normal. For example, that a lot of companies, even in oil industries, they have noticed that a lot of their job can be done remotely. The work from home is going to be a new normal, which is, in terms of the impact on the job market, the way that we can think about it is that now you're not going to be limited to where you are to basically find a job, which is basically a double-edged sword, because one is that for employees, you now can basically apply for a lot of other jobs that are not without necessity to be relocating, but at the same, which basically increases the amount of opportunities that you might get. But at the same time, for each role, there might be more candidates. So it basically also increases the level of competition as well. But again, this is not applicable to oil industry per se. This is going to be basically happening to all industries. But the impact for oil industry would be, I guess, far more important when we look at it from the aspect of not having to travel as much as we basically had to.
Oh, okay. So now this brings me to my second question. So what's going to be the permanent damage of coronavirus on oil and gas job market? Like, let's say in a year or two, we have the vaccine, everything's ready, and then we put this coronavirus behind. But what are going to be those permanent damages that the virus had done to our mentality, to our market, to the jobs, to the companies?
I don't think coronavirus is going to have as big an impact as the price of oil itself. The price of oil, for any reason, goes to $50, $55, $60 a barrel. Then, regardless of the condition of the coronavirus, the activity in oil and gas will pick up. Now, I agree that the coronavirus will impact the demand market for oil and gas. And the demand market, of course, controls the price. But there are a number of other factors that influence the market for oil and gas and for the employees of oil and gas companies. You need to remember one thing: except for this particular situation, all of the previous ups and downs of the oil and gas industry were driven by politics. It was all the previous changes in the oil and gas market were political. This is the first time in my history with the oil and gas that this is something non-political. So the condition of the oil and gas industry can again change politically depending on what the different players do and what they how the political world changes. Just look at right now what's going on. There's a big dispute between US and China. For example, consider if, and this is absolutely hypothetical, and it is, chances of it happening are very, very, very small. But if there is some kind of a conflict between US and China, if, for example, let me give you another thing. If, for example, for some reason, the supply of oil and gas to China is restricted, that will immediately have a global effect on the oil and gas prices, and that could impact the job market. So Corona is critical and it's important, and that's the main driver for the present, more or less, depression in the oil and gas industry. But you cannot discount the political events.
Okay. What do you think, Hudson?
I think companies are going to be a lot more cautious in the near future regarding what their break-even prices and how much they want to move that up and down. And I think we're going to get into the next topic here, but I'll give a preview. I'm speaking with a lot more companies that are interested in data science and data analytics. Because if the price of oil, you have no control over that, the only other way for you to make money is to reduce your costs. So how can I make my process more efficient? How can I make money even at a lower oil price? So I think Corona will have a pretty lasting effect in the near future. So for anyone that's watching this now and oil price or this job market affects them, it's not going to be terribly great in the near future.
What about you, Morteza? Like, do you think that this is Corona going to have a permanent damage or maybe benefit for some companies, like changing the mentality of people, how we see the AI and machine learning?
Well, I mean, the impact of AI and machine learning, and basically the fact that they are actually getting their ways into the oil industry, I don't think that it has anything to do with the coronavirus. I mean, with the oil prices going, oil prices were basically going down regardless. Like what Dr. Daneshy was saying is that a lot of times political events are driving the lower cost of oil. And with that, basically, I guess the companies are getting more cautious, and they start to think on better ways to optimize their process. And that I think is a far bigger driver for the inclusion of AI and data science related techniques in oil industry. I mean, the way that I think coronavirus is mainly impacting is mainly with the less demand. Other than that, I don't think that there would be any other impact on oil industry.
Oh, okay. So what about the correct me if I'm wrong, what about the existing problem in oil and gas industry that came to surface with the coronavirus, like CO2 footprint, and then investment, especially in the shale basins, that most of these companies like borrowed the money and bought the future, and then suddenly coronavirus happened and they are ended up with a big debt and they have to sell their properties and pay back. So you think that's going to change the early future or maybe the whole oil and gas industry?
I mean, what I would, the way that I look at it is that always companies have been thinking about ways to reduce their cost, right? Now with coronavirus may have been basically a bigger driver to basically push them to move more quickly. That I would agree. But other than that, I don't think that this is going to be a new direction. I mean, I agree that there are some problems that they didn't exist, but there were other problems that exist for companies, and the companies were actually thinking about ways to reduce their costs. So I think that it's mainly a push.
Okay. What about you, Dr. Daneshy? I mean, you have. Yes, sir.
Cost reduction is always an objective of every company, regardless of what the price of oil is. You always want to produce the oil at a lower price than your neighbors, what you used to do, and so on. So that pressure is always going to be there. Data analytics has been helpful in giving companies direction, but I would say perhaps even more important is technology development. Just think about it. Horizontal well drilling changed the picture of the oil and gas production in the United States. Then when you look at horizontal drilling, today we are drilling wells which are 2 miles long, horizontally 2 miles long. Altogether, the well is 5 miles long. And we induce in these wells 200, 300, 400 fractures. In some of these wells, we pump several million gallons of water and tens of millions of pounds of sand in one horizontal well. The result of that has been that these wells from a shale, which has got nano-Darcy permeability, were producing 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 barrels of oil per day. So technology is going to be playing a big role in the process. The pressure for cost reduction is always going to be there. Regardless of what the price of oil is, every company will try to produce this oil at a lower price if they can. What is really causing problem for the oil and gas industry right now is that capital has dried up. Almost all oil and gas companies, with the exception of a few majors, they are running on borrowed money. They borrow the money from investment companies, from banks or what have you. And then as they produce the oil, they pay back the reason they can, the asset that they use as backup for that borrowed money is the reserves. It's how much reserves you got, and based on the reserves that you have, then the banks will lend you money. The reserves, the value of the reserves depends on the price of oil. So when the price of oil goes down to $30 a barrel, $35 a barrel, that reserve is not worth as much as it used to be. And as a result, these companies are not able to borrow money. And when they're not able to borrow money, they cut back on their operations and they lay off their people. People lay off is one of the fastest ways of reducing costs.
What about the effect of environment? Like recently, we have seen a lot of news like, okay, the oil and gas industries are producing too much CO2, and then we need to have a smaller footprints. I mean, there is a pressure, and they are right, but we have a lot of pressure from environmentalists. Do you think that's going to affect the oil and gas industry, especially the job market?
Yes, of course it will affect it, but that is longer term. That's longer term. We cannot change for example, the CO2 footprint between now and next year, over the next next 2 to 3 years. The oil and gas industry itself is trying to reduce its own carbon footprint. That is going to have an impact, but the impact of that is going to be a little bit longer term, not as much as, for example, coronavirus that basically shut down the industry overnight.
Okay. So do you think in the early future, maybe let's say 10 years from now, we will need more engineers, geologists, highly educated people, or we will be facing a shortage of the young and smart people?
There will never be a shortage of young and smart people.
I know what I meant. Like, okay, the people who goes to petroleum engineering schools, geology school, and then want to get into the oil and gas. Like right now, many people, who wanted to get a degree may think, okay, maybe there is not a really bright future in this industry. So why shouldn't I go and become a computer scientist or any other, industry? So do you think that, for example, in 10 years, there will not be enough educated geoscience people to get into the industry and run it, or no, we will have kind of shortage of it? That's what I was like trying to see. Okay, in 10 years we will have less people who are interested in oil and gas, or not?
The enrollment in oil and gas departments in petroleum engineering, enrollment in petroleum engineering in the United States has dropped substantially. It has dropped, especially in the graduate level and undergraduate. It has dropped nearly 50%. But you keep in mind that even with the 50% drop, the present graduates who come out of universities do not have any job possibilities.
Yes.
So yes, it has dropped, but there is still a surplus in the market. And but I think that's a process that you're going to have fluctuations up and down as we move forward. there will be times when there will be a shortage of people, and there will be times when there will be surplus people who cannot find jobs. And the effect of that, the bigger effect of that is going to be in the income for these professions. If there's a shortage of people, the starting salaries and so on will go up. If there's surplus people, companies will negotiate with their employees. As a matter of fact, even now, some companies are negotiating with their employees if they will take a pay cut.
Yes, yes. But, well, is it gonna be the same? Well, as you said, the coronavirus may not have a permanent damage, so we don't know what's gonna be the picture in 5 to 10 years.
In 5 to 10 years, there will be less demand for petroleum engineers than, say, there was this year or last year. The demand for petroleum engineers will be lower because, generally speaking, the trend of the industrialization and the trend of the society is towards less use of hydrocarbons, less use of oil, for a variety of reasons that the other panelists have already mentioned correctly. There will be less demand for oil and gas, and as a result, the demand for oil and gas as a whole will grow because population will grow and the standard of living of people will grow. But the population growth will be more than the needs of the oil and gas industry. The needs of oil and gas industry will not grow as much as, say, the population will grow. And so I think as a whole, there will be less demand as a percentage of the population for petroleum engineers.
Okay. Well, Hudson, what do you think? I think that people will have hard time find jobs in oil and gas in the next 10 years, or things would get better?
So I'm going to agree with Dr. Daneshy here. But if you can convince all of your friends to leave oil and gas, and you're the only one there, you're going to make a lot of money. So there's that. It's commodity, right? It's the same for every industry as well. Accounting, finance, there's all ups and downs, right? And whenever, including software engineers, right? In the dot-com era in the 2000, everybody wanted to be a software engineer, computer science major. And then when everybody graduated, what happened? There wasn't enough jobs. Right? It's across the board. So oil and gas is probably even more affected because of political. I don't know, Elizabeth Warren, when she was bidding for the Democratic nomination, she flat out said that she wanted to ban frack. And I don't know if that's even feasible, but hypothetically, it were, how is that going to change oil and gas, right? And if you look at Europe, they're also turning more away from oil and fracking and looking at more environmental concerns. So political, I guess, global warming and looking at just environmental, more and more politicians want to be on the side of not big oil, right? So oil just has more challenges as a whole, but oil price will really dictate how much things are going to change and whether there's going to be jobs or not. So are you a gambling person or not, right? So right now things are the absolute worst. There's no petroleum engineering, like Dr. Daneshy said, dropped by 50%. But if you go in now, say next year drops by another 50%, right now 25% of what it was the year prior, and you graduate when nobody else is graduating, you're probably going to get a pretty good offer. So,
Makes sense.
Gambler are you?
Makes sense. Makes sense. No. Well, I guess I should have listened to my mom's suggestion and became a physician instead of an engineer. Well, okay. Well, it makes sense. So let's move on to more targeted questions for our panelists. As I said, this is the second part. We ask targeted questions from our panelists with regards to their background and expertise. And all other panelists who are more than welcome to provide an answer after our first panelist responded. So I'm going to start with Dr. Daneshy. So you have seen several oil and gas cycles, although none of them has been as bad as this recent one. So what's your recommendation for people who has lost their jobs? And what about those people who still have their jobs? For example, those with 5 years experience, 10 years experience, and those with over 20 years of experience.
My suggestion for those who have lost their jobs is to continue looking. Don't give up. Giving up is not going to find you a job. It is only after you're actively looking for a job that you are likely to find one. But also expand your horizon. Don't necessarily try to find a job in oil and gas industry. Try to look for opportunities in other professions, in other engineering jobs. And there may be opportunities in other industries for the oil and gas industry, for petroleum engineers to find jobs. Petroleum engineering is somewhat specialized discipline. So it is not as easy for a petroleum engineer to find a job in electrical engineering as it would be for an electrical engineer to find a job in petroleum.
That's true.
And as a matter of fact, let me also tell you something else that if you think about it, you will see, in fact, is true. In the oil and gas industry, petroleum engineers are not the majority engineers that we hire. The oil and gas industry has already hired, and there are many chemical, mechanical, and electrical engineers who are working in the oil and gas industry, and they are doing petroleum engineering jobs. So I would suggest that for those who have lost their jobs, try to see if you can find something else. And of course, you can continue to look in the oil and gas industry too. For those who have already got a job, my suggestion to them would be to keep their eyes open. We don't know how things are going to go. I would say right now, if you have a job right now and your company does not have an immediate plan to cut 10% within the next 30 days or something, your job is relatively safe. Those who were going to lose their jobs, they have already lost it.
Okay.
So if you have a job right now, you are somewhat secure, except for those cases when the company is, if the company is the target of an acquisition or if the company is going bankrupt, then of course that changes the picture. And for those who have been in the industry longer, 20, 25 years, I would say that their jobs are a little bit more secure because they have experience, and companies generally try to hang on to their experience. A 25-year engineer is capable of doing a lot more than the graduate of 5 years ago.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask other panelists to respond to this question, but before that, I want to ask another question from you, Dr. Daneshy. So do you think with the traditional education of geoscience education, young people still can survive the oil and gas? Because right now, many companies demand for more, for example, especially in data science and data engineering. So do you think that the traditional geoscience, including geologists, petroleum engineers, and all aspects of petroleum engineering, will have a chance to get a job in future, or no, that the new the managers will demand the new abilities, new expertise from them?
Actually, there is a move which is already underway right now as we are speaking, and that is to expand the curriculum for petroleum engineering to include topics which are somewhat outside of the traditional petroleum engineering. For example, data analytics is one of those topics that we are saying you need to teach that to petroleum engineers. A data analytics specialist cannot do the petroleum engineering job as good as a petroleum engineering with knowledge of data analytics. So we are recommending people to add those topics to petroleum engineering curricula. Other topics that we ask people to include are, for example, sensing and measurement, fiber optics. We are planning to include those topics within the petroleum engineering curriculum so that the petroleum engineers graduates have got skills beyond drilling and producing and calculating permeability and production rate and so on.
So it's not gonna be decline curve analysis anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, Hudson, would you like to add?
I would fully agree with this. You know, I think UH, correct me if I'm wrong, for a while they only had a master's program. Bachelor's was not offered until more recently.
Correct.
And if you want to take the more the safer route, I think that was a good model, because you started out as a mechanical engineer or something like that, then you get some experience in a oil and gas company, and then when you want to progress, that's when you fully dedicate your the next 2 years to petroleum engineering, learning just about petroleum engineering topics. So incorporating more or a different skill set, I think it's a wonderful idea. But in terms of kind of the outlook in terms for jobs, right? A mechanical engineer, you can really go into anything that makes mechanical engineering stuff, right? So
that's correct.
Chemical is one of the most versatile engineering disciplines.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, makes sense. So Dr. Daneshy, do you still recommend young people to get into the geoscience or petroleum engineering, geology?
Let me tell you a little story here, and then my opinion is that you do what you enjoy doing, because that is when you will be good at what you're doing. And regardless of what you do, if you are good at it, you will not have to worry about making money. Let me tell you just a little story. This afternoon, we had a plumber to come and take care of our sprinklers. He worked in our house for 1 hour, and he charged $350. If he works 3 such customers in 1 day, we had to wait for more than a week for him to be able to come here. If he does 3 of them a day, that's $1,000 a day. And if you consider that, extend that to a month's salary, he makes a lot more than most of the petroleum engineers in this country.
Well, we have a landlord. Sometimes he joked with me. He said, "You are just a glorified plumber." I was like,
So, my suggestion would be for young people, do what you enjoy doing. And if you enjoy what you're doing, you'll be good at it. And if you're good at it, you won't have to worry about it.
okay. What about you, Hudson? I mean, you have worked as a field engineer, you have worked for the oil and gas industry, and now you are a recruiter. So do you still recommend young people to get into the oil and gas?
I mean, I fully agree with Dr. Daneshy here, right? The companies still have to keep somebody, right? They can't just lay off everyone. And who do they keep? The best, right? And I think we talked a lot about petroleum, but we never really touched on geology and geophysics.
I meant overall geoscience, you know, the whole oil and gas job.
Yeah, that's rough. That is very rough. You can't really transition to any, I guess you can go into mining and things like that, but the job market is just not there, right? If we're not exploring oil and gas, if companies aren't spending as much money on exploration, you're just not going to have a job.
Okay.
I would shy away from that if you don't love it. But if you do love it and you love rocks, then you know you're going to make money working with rocks. That's just how it is, because you're going to be the best at it.
Okay.
Let me add another thing that I don't know how much the panelists know about. The majority of the petroleum engineering students in this country, majority of them are foreign students.
Yes, that's correct. I mean,
I did not know
including myself. So. well, Morteza, I wanna ask you the same questions, but I'm gonna ask you another questions, which I think is gonna cover this question too. So, you have you know, been a data scientist, but you are also got a degree in petroleum engineering. So, do you believe that all of us should learn a data scientist? Do you think that all of us in oil and gas should become a data scientist? And then if somebody
No,
asks you that,
he won competition.
that's true. And then if anybody asks you, okay, I'm going to pick up my major, I'm wondering between the computer engineering, computer science, and petroleum engineering, what would you answer to them?
Well, I mean, obviously I have a bias towards data science and machine learning, so don't be surprised when I answer. But what I would say is that, I mean, going back to the previous question that what Dr. Daneshy was saying, I'm going to start with the second question, that second portion of the question that you asked. Between computer engineering, computer science, and petroleum engineering, if I want to recommend one, I would say that go for what you enjoy doing. I mean, I was a petroleum engineering student. I never got a job in oil industry, and I was a pure data scientist. So I think that transitioning from any industry to any industry is feasible as long as you have the required skill set. And you will get the required skill set if you truly enjoy whatever you are doing. For example, for my case, I was interested in basically application of AI and machine learning in reservoir characterization. So I basically started as a researcher in petroleum engineering department, but because I was interested in AI and machine learning, I basically got the skill set required. So that's number one. The other thing that I want to say is that oil industry, like any other industry, is basically facing new challenges every day. And I think that there are untapped areas in oil industry that can be solved now through the use of AI. I can, for example, give you two examples. One would be in the, this is one of the things that I was actually doing when I was a PhD student. Which is basically in the field of digital rock physics. So one of the problems that people were interested at the time was to estimate the properties of rocks, like relative permeabilities and capillary pressures from the digital samples, which has been basically a computationally challenging and expensive problem. And there was a lot of complications to solve that problem analytically. Now there are recent studies that have shown that you can basically leverage a lot of techniques in computer vision and deep learning to basically get an accurate and effective estimate of the rocks. The other thing is about the application of reservoir characterizations. In reservoir characterization, which can basically directly tie down to the cost of the operation, and that can actually help companies to bring down the cost by optimizing their portfolio management strategies. So what I would say is that because of a lot of improvements that is happening around the field of AI itself, and also in the advancement of the techniques that by which we can collect and store data, there are a lot of untapped areas in oil industry that we can now leverage AI for. I think that becoming it, so I think that there's going to be a lot of AI related topics and AI related opportunities in oil industry, like any other industry. I mean, personally, like I said, I am biased toward that and data science, and I can't imagine a world in the near future where there is an industry where it's well functioning industry and it's not leveraging AI to a major degree for its applications.
Okay, so now it brings me to my next question. So do you think that all of us, for example, somebody like me or somebody with 10 years experience who has been a pure geoscience, in the oil and gas industry, including petroleum, geology and everything, we should start and learn data scientists and become some kind of semi-expert in it? Because that's what probably industry is going to ask for, from the employees and the professionals. Or no, we could just learn some basics and just stick with our engineering or geology, geoscience background and education.
Well, again, it depends on what you actually want to do. But I think this is similar to what happened in about software developments a few decades ago. I mean, 20 years ago, I don't think that one necessarily had to know how to code to become a successful researcher, right? But nowadays, if you're not, unless you're not a pure experimentalist, you need to know how to code, right? I mean, even if you are experimentalist, you need to know basics of coding and basics of, you know, the algorithmic thinking. So it doesn't mean that we're a software developer per se, but it means that we know how to leverage the technology. Now, I think that this is going, and basically we need to become like smart users. And I think that a similar thing is going to happen to data science. One doesn't need to be well aware of the math behind the algorithm, or basically know the pros and cons of different algorithms and different use cases per se. But I think that, I mean, the phrase that you use, I really like that. The semi-expert data in data science, that's something that I guess everybody in any industry need to move towards.
Okay. Okay. Well, great. Oh, so what's your recommendation for those who are interested in learning more about the data science, and especially in oil and gas? Any specific online course or any resource, you know, such as degrees, these universities? I mean, if you open your LinkedIn, probably you'll see an ad about you know, some AI or data scientists. So what's your recommendation?
I mean, I've always said that the best way to learn something is through implementation. So, and you don't need to basically get a certificate or, you know, go to any formal educational program to basically learn that. I mean, there are a lot of online courses, like courses in Coursera, Udemy, Udacity, that you can leverage if you want to basically get yourself educated in a field. I personally like Udemy. A couple of courses I had taken back in the days where I was in grad school. But right now, I know that there are two programs that I've heard a lot of good things about them. One is the Galvanize program, and the other one is the Insight. One of them, the Galvanize program, is actually I think it was a 6 months program, and it used to cost about $15,000. The Insight, however, is a basically more selective program. You need to apply. It's going to be free, but you need to go through a screening process. You need to have a couple rounds of interviews. The good things about these two programs is that they basically provide you with good networking opportunity. So if you want to network with other data scientists and across multiple industries, those can be effective.
Okay. Is it okay if some of our audience contact you on LinkedIn and ask?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Well, Hudson, I want to ask you these questions. Well, we already have reviewed them, but so let's just start with the first one.
Can I add a little more to that last question?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right. So here's my, I talk to a lot of people every day, right? That have 10 years of experience. Some have 25, some have 2, right? Just a broad range. And there's really 2 types of ways to move forward if you want to stay in oil and gas. One is you want to stay an individual contributor, staying technical, and that's what you do. So if that's your route and you have 10 years of experience, you need to know how to code. You need to learn Python, you need to know analytics, like you just need to go and do it. Okay. The other route is you want to be management, or you want to say, I want to look at forecasts. I want to talk about business plan. I want to look at the business from a management/economic perspective. If that's your goal, then you can have a understanding of it, and that's probably good enough. But you do need something else, whether that's finance, it's accounting, right? It has to be something that complements you, and it's not just technical work. Because so I have actually a search right now in Morteza's field of pharma. A data analytics company is looking for a VP to roadmap how they set up their database. And the requirement is not that this person needs to be a machine learning engineer for the last 10 years working for a big biotech company like Natera or something, but it's how do we build this? If we run experiments now, what are the parameters we have to think about 3 months from now, right? We don't need them now, but 3 months from now, will we need that? And if we can do that, we can set that up now as opposed to looking back 3 months from now, trying to find the data that we collected, but we don't know where it is, that's a huge problem, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's what I wanted to add.
So let me ask Dr. Daneshy if he wants to add anything. I mean, Dr. Daneshy, you have worked with different people. I mean, young and experienced. So what do you think?
I think no matter what your specialty is, it is always necessary for you to know enough about peripheral subjects so that you'll be able to talk to them. Even for instance, even somebody who is not in data analytics at all, if he has to interact with them, he needs to know the language, the terminology, and what can they do, what can they not do. You need to be able to make a judgment as to whether what they're promising is deliverable or not.
Okay.
So as far as learning different things, I think for all of us, it's very important to try to continuously be in a learning mode. If nothing else, to the extent that we are able to interact with others better, and that will also make us a lot more valuable to our company. Because when somebody, let's take data analytics, everybody's talking about. A salesman walks into your office and he starts to tell you whether I can do this, or that. Somebody has to make a judgment as to whether you should employ that service or not. And being able to assist in that process is in itself valuable. Even though you don't necessarily have to be an expert, but you need to know enough about the subject to be conversant and to be able to make a judgment about the value of what you're hearing and what is being proposed. Just go to any of the technical meetings and listen to all the papers and listen to all the claims that are being made. 50% of those claims don't have any basis.
That's true. Okay, thank you, Dr. Danesh. Well, okay, Hudson. So we have these 3 questions that we talk about. So I'm gonna start with the first one. A recruiter contacted me. I sent them my CV and I never heard back again. What should I do?
So from if you're applying for a job, if you're actively looking for a job, I would have definitely talked to the recruiter before sending a CV. I get a lot of this as well. People just send me their CV and sometimes I'm not even asking for a CV. Right? If you're actively looking for a job, it's not bad. Just do it because you're trying to get your name out there. But odds are, if a recruiter hasn't contacted you back, you need to follow up, right? Because sometimes we forget, sometimes email just doesn't work. I can tell you right now, there's about 50 messages on LinkedIn I need to respond back to. And sometimes it just slips through the cracks, right? I can have it on my notes somewhere and then I just can't find that piece of paper. So, and recruiters come in good and bad as well. Some just are not good. And if you get that one, then they may just have forgotten about you completely. So,
well, okay, that's absolutely true. But I'm telling this as a as an employee, as a job seeker. So sometimes when I used to send my resume to them, when I contact the recruiters before sending my resumes, this was the answer I got. Okay, go online and apply for it. We will look at all the resumes, like all the applications. So I mean, I wanted to talk to them and say, okay, I have disabilities or these things. I know these, but the response most of them was, okay, just go online and apply or send our resume.
So here, I guess maybe I have to give a little background on how recruiters work, right? So we only look for fits for the jobs that are currently ongoing. So unless I know you personally, like we're friends or something, I have you, you're on my mind, right, as I'm going through things. But if we're strangers and we maybe only have talked once or twice, then I'm not going to remember you whenever a job comes up because I talk to so many people throughout the day. So talking to a recruiter when they don't have anything for you, it's fine, but it's not going to give you immediate results because I'm only recruiting on the things that I have to do.
Okay, so I understand. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? Well, okay, I understand. Okay, so now the second question. I've been applying for months and I only get rejections email. or no response at all. What I'm doing wrong?
So there could be, well, a lot of things, right? There's a whole career dedicated to helping people finding jobs, career coaches, right? The first thing, if you're not getting any interviews, that means your resume is not good. Now, plain and simple. Or you're submitting resumes to the wrong jobs, right? If my entire resume is on drilling and I'm only applying to reservoir engineering jobs, probably not going to get a call, right? It just is what it is. If you're oil and gas and your entire resume is on oil and gas and you're applying for construction jobs, you're applying for things that maybe in your eyes are not as good as a job you used to have, but you're not going to get callbacks because the experience you have is not deemed valuable by the other side. Right? Construction managers, even though they make probably less than, most likely less than petroleum engineers, you still don't have the skill set to do their job. So you're just applying to the wrong place.
Okay.
Those are the two main ones.
Oh. So now third question. So I want to switch to a different industry that's more stable. What are some considerations?
The best one I still think of the topic we're on, it's data science, looking at analytics. Even though analytics still has its own specialized fields, right? So if you're doing something that's more protein related, it's going to be very different than if you're looking at manufacturing pumps, right? But the skill set of Python and R, right, and looking at TensorFlow for machine learning, that's transferable. So you want to look at careers where there is other applications besides the one that you're currently on, but at the same time, you may have to take a step back and pay for all of these. So some consideration. And like what Dr. Daneshy said, it's what you love. If you don't have a passion and you want stability, pick a job or pick a career that there's a lot of places hiring for it.
Well, it makes makes sense. Well, Dr. Daneshy, would you like to add to anything to these questions, like regarding a CV, applying for jobs, contacting recruiters?
Right now, at this particular time, I think the job market pretty much in all industries and all professions is such that there aren't those many jobs available, And my suggestion would be basically what Hudson said, and that is to mingle with people, mix with people, and try to build a network of friends and acquaintances and so on, so that two or three things. First, they know you, so when you send a resume, when you send a resume, they are expecting it, and they don't just throw it into the wastebasket or ignore it. First, and second, they will be able to tell you what opportunities there are, and then you can see whether you can fit into those opportunities or not. So I would say networking and knowing a lot of people and building relationships is, even if you have got a permanent job and it's very secure, it is still a very good idea. People like friendly people. And so if you come across as being a friendly person, whether you're looking for a job or not, people look forward to talking with you, to meeting you, and to interacting with you.
Yes, it makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. Well, Morteza, what about you? I mean, well, I guess the recruiting resumes and CVs is something similar in all industries.
Yeah, well, actually, I wanted to add to one of the points that Hudson mentioned, which is, if you're not getting an interview, perhaps there's something wrong with your CV. Because I remember when I was applying for jobs, I mean, I was mainly applying for jobs in data science field, which, I mean, there were a lot of openings, but I wasn't getting any interviews. So I basically contacted someone who was specialist in CV editing and stuff like that. He made some minor changes, or rather changes that looked minor in my eyes, but all of a sudden everything got changed. And I've seen that also personally, that there are a lot of, what I would do or what I would suggest to people is that try to see that whether or not what your CV is basically showing matches the things that you are seeing in the job description. For example, one of the problems that a friend of mine was facing was that he actually got his PhD in biomechanics, and I know a lot of things that he had been doing, and he was a perfect data scientist, but he wasn't getting any interviews. When I was looking at his resume, I noticed that his resume was very focused on things related to biomechanics that are not transferable. So things like what Hudson was saying, that Python, R, data analysis, the TensorFlow, machine learning, and stuff like that, which were things that he had been doing, but there were not a lot of mention of that in his CV.
Okay, makes sense. Well,
let me make a suggestion. Look,
sure.
I've hired a lot of people in my life, okay? So I've been on the other side of it. I've hired a lot of people. One of the things I suggest is that keep your resumes brief. Sending a 10-page resume, what it does is, first of all, likely people are not going to read. They will not go any more than the first or second page. First, and second, when somebody reads your resume and it is full of exaggerations and things that all it does is it reduces your credibility. Keep your resumes brief, no more than a couple of pages. And basically, if people are interested, they will find a few clues in your resume that attracts their attention. Then they'll contact you, and then you can tell them all you want.
That's true. That's absolutely true. So listen to the Dr. Daneshy's advice. He was my dissertation committee, so I know how valuable are his advice. And I appreciate it, Dr. Daneshy, for accepting our invitation. So this is the end of the second part. Now we have some questions from audience. So this is for Dr. Daneshy, but please join in Morteza and Hudson if you want to provide more answer. So when the oil and gas industry are down, starting a startup in oil and gas, is it a good idea or a bad idea?
Starting as an employee of someone or starting a business, your own business?
Well, starting your own business. And I mean, this question is a little bit wide, because you usually need a lot of finance to start a company, unless it's like a consulting or some data related. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but like I know many companies who formed in the past cycle in 2014 when the prices were down, so they bought some projects and then the prices went up and they made money. But overall, is it a good thing to start a company right now as a startup?
Let's understand something. When we talk about oil and gas industry, most of us think that oil and gas industry refers to companies that are drilling wells and producing oil out of the ground. Oil and gas industry is a lot broader than that. There are so many services which are used by the oil and gas industry that do not involve any of those types of activities. So should you start your own business with the idea of having oil and gas industry as your client? I think that's quite okay. I think actually having your own business has got the advantage that you don't have to worry about being fired. You may starve to death because you don't have any income. You're not being fired.
That's absolutely true.
So I think starting your own business is generally, if you look at it, it shows a level of enthusiasm and a certain adventurism, which is always good. So I would suggest, if that is what comes to your mind, by all means, you need to try to do that. Another thing to consider also is the possibility of getting 2 or 3 people like yourselves with different sets of skills, so that collectively you can offer a service beyond your own capabilities and beyond the capabilities of your partners, but something that as a whole is attractive to the industry. And I think that's a very good idea, and it's something that I would encourage people to do.
Right. What about other panelists? would you
Oh,
like to add?
100%. If you and a couple friends, all of you guys don't have jobs, you guys should definitely start a company. If you get somebody who's in sales, somebody in finance, and you're the technical guy, I mean, you have a team right there. You can probably even go and ask for funding.
That's good. Well, what about you, Morteza?
I agree with what Dr. Daneshy was saying earlier too.
So the second question, it's for Morteza. So learning data science and moving from oil industry to other industry, is it a reasonable decision for the current condition?
Well, again, it goes back to what I was saying. If it depends on what you want to do. Well, yeah, right now there's a high demand for data science related opportunities, but this is I would think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities as other people are coming into this industry in near future. There would be a surplus, and then probably the demand will go down. So I mean, I would think that if this is something that you enjoy, yeah.
Okay. Hudson, do you have anything to add?
To which part?
Oh, switching from like moving from oil and gas to, let's say, another industry, for example, data science. Is it a reasonable decision at the current condition?
Do you like programming? I was an engineer and I hated programming. I was in Dr. Daneshy's class. You were my TA. So if we had that project we did, hated it. I can tell you that right now. So I would not be a good candidate. But if you're someone who enjoy that, then I think you should go for it, because that's something you will need. And if you despise it, you need to change industries.
Okay. So Morteza, here's another question. It's kind of related to the previous question. I know you haven't worked for the oil industry for much, but how do you compare working for a oil company versus a data science company?
Oh, sorry, your voice was breaking. Can you repeat that?
Oh, yes, I said, so here's another question is for you that it's besides the job security, how do you compare working in the oil industry versus working in a data science?
I mean, honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind is basically what is about the job security. But other than that, I mean, I guess it depends on what industry you're working with, you're working for. I mean, again, it depends on the nature of the company. So, for example, I guess, I mean, for my case, where I'm working right now is completely different than the previous company that I was working with. But that was mainly because the previous company was a startup. It was, I mean, you basically know what the fuss is about their startups and how challenging, fun, and exciting it can be, but at the same time, it can provide a lot of uncertainty and insecurities as well. I guess that the main thing would be around the job security.
So that was the last questions. Before I just summarize our panel.
Can I add to that?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's fine. So I actually recruit for machine learning engineers, data science, deep learning engineers, and oil and gas. So I think data analytics and data science is an exciting field, similar to what oil and gas was maybe in the early days of the 80s or 90s, right? Because oil and gas, like the dream, right, is that I work in Exxon for 7 years, then maybe I get a few people, go find our own assets, and we drill, borrow money from private equity, borrow $50 million, whatever, get our wells drilled, get our second round of funding, then sell this thing, and I walk away with like $80 million in my pocket, right? That's very real in data science right now, right? If you look at the funding where the money's actually going, you look at some of the big ones like Natural Gas Partners, you look at Pearl Energy Investment. These guys are kind of stuck, but if you look at the venture capitalists who had their money in oil and gas, so much of it is coming out. Where are they going? Biotech, bioinformatics, healthcare, pharma, because no matter what happens, people are going to want to live longer. They want to be healthier. That's not going to change. Oil and gas, we don't know. So I'm talking to all these small companies, right? They're in their first round of funding, Series A. They just got funding. Or I'm talking to companies that are 6-7 years in that are about to go IPO in 2 years, right? And these founders in their mid-30s, when that thing goes IPO, they're going to pocket $30 million after paying back investors. So I think it's just terribly exciting. And if I could do school over again, I would not be picking petroleum engineering.
Yes. Okay. So it's the end of our panel, but each of our panelists, if you would like to add anything to the whole panel, we have about 2 to 3 minutes. So I'll start with Dr. Daneshy.
Well, no, I think the discussion has been very good. And the one thing I like to add is that it's always good to keep a positive approach and a positive attitude. Giving up is not going to get you anything. So stay positive, and just assuming that there are no jobs, therefore there's no need for me to try, that's not going to help anything. Stay positive, stay active, and you're going to be surprised.
Morteza? Morteza, would you like to add anything? Last thought?
No, I don't have anything specifically to add. The only thing is basically was the advice that my supervisor gave me when I started my master's with him, which is something that Dr. Daneshy was also mentioning, is that go after what you really enjoy, because if you are the best as what you do, no matter what it is, you're always wanted. And it's much easier to be the best at what you want and what you enjoy.
Hudson?
I want to basically repeat what Dr. Daneshy said, that the positivity, it's so important. I talked to a lot of people that feel defeated, and when they're defeated, it resonates from how they interact with people, right? Even if you're very strong and maybe the perfect candidate, sometimes I can't present you to my client because I think you might make me look bad, right? Or you're talking to a hiring manager and energy's not there. They're like, well, we really thought this guy was going to be like this go-getter, but his voice just sounded defeated, right? So be positive every day. Maybe do yoga. My fiance does that and it helps her a lot. So I don't know how much that applies to everybody else, but find something else, go for a walk. I know quarantine's kind of making things weird, but definitely go get some fresh air and don't just stay at home. Don't stay on YouTube for too long. And then my actual advice for something that you can use right now. If your resume is not getting the attention that you're looking for, you may be writing a resume as you're writing it, but don't do that. And instead, write your resume as if you're reading it. So think about that for a second, right? How is it presented when you see it? Is it formatted nicely, right? Are you getting objectives? Is it too long? If you're reading this piece of paper, does it excite you? And if you, after you read it, you're like, oh, it's okay, you need to change it.
Makes sense. Oh, well, thank you. I'm just gonna summarize it, our panel in very quickly. So this effect of COVID-19, it's probably something temporary because it doesn't have any political background. It's something just related to the demand and it affected everybody. Once the demand picked up, we will see the oil price hopefully will jump to 50s and 60s. So in the next 10 years, there might be less demand for petroleum engineers, geoscientists, geologists, but if you love what you're doing, there will be always a demand for you. In terms of a data scientist, all of us don't need to become a data scientist, but we need to have some basic knowledge of data science. This is gonna be some of the basic for any engineers probably in the next 10 to 15 years. There are good programs to apply for, Galvanize and Insight program. Well, you could get more information, just Google them. Stay positive, don't give up, and be friends with your recruiters. Pay attention to your resumes, and
Take Hudson for lunch.
Yes. Well, so that's all. And thank you so much. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And for all of our audience, please follow APPIH, like their posts, and help them to reach as many as engineers and geologists and people as you can. Well, Hamid, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Once again, I would like to thank Dr. Khoshghadam for such a good moderation and all the panelists for very insightful points that they provide for us. Just for information of all the participants, a recorded version of today's session will be available at APPIH social networks by end of today. Thank you, everybody, and have a great time.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank you for having
time.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good evening, everyone.
Bye-bye.